Hey everyone, Leo with Dreaming Tree here, and welcome to the assembly for our Tealight Candlescape. It's kind of a larger piece, and we've done something similar to it in the past. I believe it was our Summer Nights and Flights bundle that had something sort of similar, but this is geared more towards fall and Thanksgiving. Before we get into the assembly of the actual structure, we're going to go through and do some paper piecing as well as some flower making, just to get everything ready to go, so that when we have the base constructed, we can just start popping everything on. So without further ado, let's just hop right in here. And we're gonna start off with some simple things. And of course, I've done a little bit of pre-prep because this actual final piece, it has the same design elements on both sides, so that no matter what side of the table you're on, you're gonna see the same exact thing. So you can see here in front of me, I have my acorns already put together. So we're gonna put together the ones for the other side. And it's very simple. So you can see the final product here, and then what the pieces look like before we actually put everything together. Okay, so essentially 3 layers. We're gonna start off by taking this layer. You can see that I hit this with a little bit of ink to give it a nice shaded effect. And we're gonna begin by taking this and gluing it to the, in our case, we used vanilla colored AC cardstock as our backing. So we're gonna glue that down to the AC vanilla. And again, you can omit the inking, but I highly recommend taking the time to do it. It's very therapeutic and fun, and will definitely make this stand out. Okay, so you pop that right on there. So you can see here, not only does it double it up and make it thicker, more durable, but we have a nice contrast there where I guess it almost looks like the light hitting it. Okay, so we have that. Now we also have our little caps that go on top of our little acorns. And I also inked this with a little bit of a darker brown, and then I ran it through my embossing machine with the Tiny Dot, which is a Sizzix brand. I believe it's a Tim Holtz, actually. Tim Holtz through Sizzix brand embossing folder. Just throw some glue on there, and you can see this little thingy here that's sticking up. Obviously, you want to line that up with the center there, and just make sure that that sits in the correct spot. And there you have it. Okay, so we got one for one side, one for the other. These are identical. Obviously, this one's going to be going that way. So we're done with that, and then we have a single one. And I don't think really need to explain anything here. It's fairly simple, just paper piecing, taking you back to the days of scrapbooking. Nothing overly complicated or dimensional at this point. We'll get to that later. Okay, so we're gonna pop this on here. Just gotta use your fingers to nudge it whichever way it needs to go to make sure that everything is nice and lined up. And finally, this one is just a single one. Get your glue on there. And we'll pop that right into place. Using the stem part here as kind of a visual guide to help the rest of it snap into place. Okay, so our acorns are done. Again, this is gonna go on one side, this is gonna go on the other side. So you can start kind of making a pile. Because you're essentially going to be doing the same thing twice, once on one side, once on the other side. All right, next up, may as well just do this systematically, almost as if we have an assembly line here. We have some beautiful, well, these are oak leaves. Okay, and as you can see here, I also, light is a little bit intense here, so you're probably not seeing the contrast as much as I am. I guess at that angle you do. And of course we hit that with a little bit of Tiny Dot embossing as well. So essentially this is pretty simple. These will be, they're gonna look like, they're actually pointing down. So one on one side, one on the other. So this is for one of the sides. And then the other side is gonna use 2 of these as well. They're gonna be pointing downward like this. So all we need to do to finish this piece up is find these little, in this case this is a pomegranate color, American cardstock pomegranate. You can find that in your supply list. Just throw a little bit of glue on there. You'll notice on the leaf here that you have a little marker to help you with the positioning of this to make sure that it's nice and centered and consistent, giving the leaf a nice symmetrical look. There you have it, just like that. Grab the other piece that looks like this, and get that glued down, like so. Again, use those markers. You just gotta kind of pop it right in between the markers on both sides. You'll see how that looks up close once you actually fix your gaze on it. Okay. All right, so 2 there and 2 there. Put this in one stack with the other acorns, then put this in the other one, because that's going to go on the opposite side. All right, next up we have, and let's take a look at, we'll get into the flowers here in a second. Let's take a look at this little leaf element here. Now, again, we got the same thing on both sides, and one thing that we're going to talk about and do is some training. And in this case, what we're going to do is, and you can do this however you want, this is just sort of how we decided to do it. Grab a dowel. This is a 3/8 inch dowel. You can use something bigger if you'd like. I would not use anything smaller because you're going to risk creasing the paper, and I think aesthetically that's a little unsightly. So I try to use thicker dowels whenever possible. But we're going to take it, and I've got the paper pinched between the dowel and my finger, and then you can see how I kind of have it bent. And if you slide the dowel through while it's bent, you see what happens? It curves it. Okay, so I'm going to curve it up there, and then starting here, I'm going to curve it down, bring it back, so it kind of creates an S shape slightly. You can see that. Let me put my hand under there. So you can see how there's kind of an S shape there. Okay, and for these two on the side, well, we can do, I'm going to bring it back a little bit, and then I'm just going to curl the tip forward, and we'll do the same thing here. Bring it back, curl the tip forward. Okay, now we do have some overlays or appliques, whatever you want to call them, that go on here. And let's make sure we get the right ones here. I believe that this guy here, you'll notice that there are some indicators and some markers on these pieces to help you with the positioning of those, so you get them nice and centered, and you can see where that one's going to go. Now, what I want you to do is take this and place this on the leaf that you've already trained and see how it rests. Okay, here I can tell that this is going to be okay, but you can see how it's kind of sticking up here a little bit. Take your dowel and just kind of bend it or train it so that it wraps and kind of falls into place with the natural curve that we created for this guy here. So essentially you want it to be nice and flush, and train it accordingly based on how you trained the first base layer. Okay, so you can see that that one is just kind of curved at the top. That's all I really needed to do. And you could even kind of bring this up a little bit because there is a curve down here, just so that life is easier for you when you go to glue this down, and try to make sure that everything is making good contact. So we'll go ahead and throw some glue on the back of this and pop that right in place. Now obviously this is also inked with a darker green, as is this. And I ran this through a Derice Crackle folder. Okay, just line that up with the little guides there. And press that down, hold that in place. And the cool thing is too, while there's glue on here, and while this sets, the glue, when it solidifies and hardens, will actually help keep the shape of this training that we did. Because when it glues it, or when it dries almost hard, like a solid. So it's really going to help keep this shape permanently. Okay, so moving on to this side here, I'm going to find this piece. You can see that there are markers here that correspond with the little points here on our leaf. And again, just to make sure that this hugs this nicely, it looks like we're going to have to train this down a little bit. So I'm going to take my dowel and just train it down. And I might have done it too much, but that's okay. Better to train it more, because you can always push it down. But if it's coming up, it's going to give you a little bit of trouble. So, and even if you don't train it, you can still get it glued down. You're just going to have to keep your hand on it longer probably to help it learn the position that it needs to be in. All right, so again, using the little markers here, make sure you get everything in the right spot. And there we go, press that down. And again, as it's drying, you can take this time to really mold it into the shape that you want. And by the time that glue sets, it'll have a nice permanent hold in the shape that you desire. Okay, just like that. And then towards the end, once we get everything in place, if we want to, curl this even more to make it more dramatic, we can absolutely do that. It's not a big deal. It's never too late. All right, so this one again, put it here. It looks like I need to fold this part down a little bit and kind of give it a little bit of a curve going up. So we'll kind of bring this up a little bit, just slightly. And it looks like the middle needs to go down a bit, kind of like an S shape. And let's see how that fits. Okay, not perfect as far as the training, but close enough. And you just pop that in place. We're gonna have to probably press down a little bit longer than I did on the last one, just to make sure that everything gets a good grip, but that's fine too. And then as I mentioned, whoops, while that glue is setting, it's an opportune time to really shape this leaf, the set of leaves, so that they stay the way that you want them to. So you can see here what I'm doing. I'm kind of creating an S as I'm pushing down to make sure that this layer that we're gluing down is making good contact. But while I'm doing that, I'm kind of shaping it as well, giving it that nice S curve. And you can see how awesome that looks as opposed to it just being flat. Okay, and we're going to bring this all together in the end, obviously, when we go to assemble everything. So you're going to do this twice. Once for each side. And you can see on this one here, I actually curved it forward and then back and then forward again. And this one's coming forward, this one's actually going back, and then the tip's just coming forward. So no right or wrong way to do this. However you want to do it is fine. Okay, so again, you're gonna make 2 of these, put these off to the side in your piles. And now we can move on to, well, I guess we can talk about something else as well real quick. These are the actual little panels that the candles are going to sit on. Okay, they are scored here. Okay, this is going to be the surface. This is a little bit the side part, and I did ink this. This again is a pomegranate color. I hit this with a little bit of purple, and then I ran it through my embossing machine with this beautiful fall leaf motif. Okay, so essentially you can take 3 of these, put them in one pile. Take the other 3, put them in the other pile, okay? And I can move on to, let's take a look at the flowers real quick, because those are very simple. A lot of our dreamers have made all sorts of flowers over the years with us, and these are not hard at all. I would probably put these in line with, well, I think a beginner could do this. If this is your first time, don't worry about it. It's not that hard. So you're gonna have a total of 6 flowers, 2 of each color, and they're gonna be staggered in various ways on the platform once all said and done. To put these together, what we're gonna do is I'm gonna take my same dowel, 3/8 inch dowel, and I'm putting the dowel right in the center of the petal, and then with these 2 fingers, I'm kind of holding either side of each petal, and I'm just gonna push that up against the natural curve of the dowel to make it dimensional. Now you can see how, let me see if I put my hand on there. You can see how that's flat, completely flat on that side, but this one has a little bit of a curve to it, okay? And then you're gonna go around and do that to each of the petals, okay? All the way around. Good, good. Just like that. And then if you want to make it more bold as far as the training, go ahead and take and just pinch the tip of the leaf a little bit. Just literally pinching the tip of the leaf. Don't overdo it. You don't want it to crease so that it looks too much like paper that's creased. So be gentle with it, but if you kind of pinch the very tip of it, it will bring those sides in even more and give this thing more dimension. Now, as you notice on all of these flowers, I did hit them with ink. On the yellow one, I used a nice orange, since essentially it's just, orange is kind of just a darker version of yellow. On this, I believe, is a brown sugar color. I just used a tan or a darker brown. And on this one here, this is, I forget what color this is. Let's see, that's, where is it? I think, yeah, this is AC, no, it's not, is it? Yeah, AC apricot, I believe. I actually hit this with a little bit of red, but then also just kind of hit the tips of this with a little bit of purple as well to give it a sort of a two-toned feel. Okay, so each flower using the same colors, so in this case, 2 of the same pieces of apricot, that's the sunflower color. You've got brown sugar there to create each flower. Each flower needs 2 layers and then a center. All the centers are the same color. Obviously you can see here I've inked the centers. Also ran those through an embossing machine to give them the little tiny dot effect. Okay, and we're making a total of 6 flowers, each flower having 2 layers, and there's 2 of each color. And you're going to end up with a total of 6 flowers. And to assemble them, it's very simple. We've got 2 of the same color here. Just going to throw a little bit of glue in the center of one of them and pop that right in there. You want to offset the petals so that they're not right on top of each other, like so. Make sure it's nice and centered. There you have it. Later on, once we get it in place, if we want to take and kind of crease these up to make them pop out even more, we can do that. I wouldn't waste my time doing that right now because we need to put a little bit of glue in the center here and take our little center and pop that right into place, like so. Okay. So you're going to repeat this a total of 5 more times. As I mentioned, I already have 5 out of 6 completed here. I'll walk you through this one more time with our nice, I think it's either sunflower or mustard. Let me see here. Yeah, that's mustard actually, I think. Anyway, same process. Take your dowel and shape each petal around the dowel. Give it a nice curve. There you go. And then if you want, you can pinch it, make it a little more dimensional. I'm going to do the same thing to the other one. It's essentially the same color. Put them together here in just a moment. Okay. Grab the other one and get your dowel in there. Pinch it around the dowel. Okay, just continuing around the petal, around the flower, I should say. Okay, got that. And then again, if you want, give it a little bit of a pinch right at the tip. Make that dimension a little more pronounced. There we go. And a little tip, I'd suggest kind of doing this in assembly line fashion. So get all the petals, get them trained first, like literally just do all that, and then go through the pinching, and then I'd go through the assembly just to kind of, get into more of a rhythm with one specific task. It does make things go a little bit quicker. All right, so we're going to throw a little bit of glue right in the center. You don't need to overdo it. A little bit goes a long way. Again, pop that right in the center of the other one. Make sure that the petals are offset. You don't want them right on top of each other like that. You want them offset, like so. Make them as full as possible. All right, it's fighting me right now. There we go. Perfect. Give that a press right in the center where that glue was. And then throw another little drop of glue there in the center. Grab your green center and press that down. And there's your beautiful flower. Okay, and as I mentioned later on, we can take and bring these flowers in more, the petals. But for now, you can go ahead and just put these off to the side as we'll be applying these to the final structure once we actually have that fully assembled. Okay, all right, so next up is this set of leaves, and this is again our pomegranate color. I've already put this one together, okay, and you'll notice that, and this is something that is going to be important later on. You see this little shape that is created here? Let me put my hand down there, see if we can, let's see, throw some white under there. There we go. See that little shape there? If you get the wrong 2 sides together, it's not going to create that shape. I'll illustrate that here in just a second, but essentially we're going to be taking and gluing, because this is made of 2 layers, just to make it more sturdy. We're going to glue the 2 layers together. I did hit this with a little bit of purple ink. It's very subtle because the pomegranate's already a pretty rich, dark color. Okay, but what you're going to want to do is find the pieces that match up here, and also just make sure that this little notch here is the correct size. Okay, it should be. I think I don't think you're going to need to worry too much about that. No, and actually you won't, because it's only going to work one way. But anyway, what we're looking for is 2, you can see that the 2 acorns are at the bottom with 1 acorn on top. So use that as your kind of starting point, and then the leaves should go upward, okay? So you need 2 for the left and 2 for the right. As you can see, for the other side of our project, I already have 2 glued together and 2 glued together. So a total of 4 pieces here, but they're already glued together to make it one solid piece on each side. And what we're going to do to make this easier, I already did this before, so I kind of figured out the best way to do this, is we're actually going to glue the center of this first, just to get this nice and anchored. Trying to do this and the actual individual leaves is going to be, well, it's almost like some kind of surgery, and we want to avoid that. We want to have fun and not worry about trying to hit every single mark on the spot our first try. So we're just going to put glue pretty much up to that point, just before where the actual leaves start. And let's get this part glued down and together. Get that as centered as you can. There we go. Perfect. Press that down. And then what I did was I just peeled this back. I actually left it on my surface because it's kind of jiggly, and it is a little hard to put glue on something that's constantly moving around. So I left it on my table and started off with, let me clean this off real quick. Started off with a nice line right up the stem. Okay, and you don't need to worry about getting it on all the sides of the stem, because as you push the other piece down, it's going to take that glue and spread it out to the outside usually. Okay, so, and then we're just going to put our glue around the rest of the little leaves here. Make sure you get some glue down the center. And then as this is drying, I'm actually going to do a little bit of training to this, because as I mentioned before, while that glue is still sort of, well, while it's not set yet, we can actually use it to our advantage to shape these leaves. And then when that glue solidifies, it'll kind of keep it in that shape permanently. Okay, so there you have it. You got your glue on there. And just bring this down very slowly, making sure that I'm working my way from the bottom to the top, making sure that each of these little leaves is nice and lined up, like so. Just like that. Okay, if it's a hair off, not a big deal. That actually did that better than I did my first time. So by the time you put your second or third one together, you're going to be a pro at this. Now, while this glue is still setting, you can go ahead and start folding this back. Bring these back to kind of shape them so they're not so flat. I'm doing this one back. I can actually even take the tip of it and go the other way, kind of create an S shape there. Okay, and then move my way up. I'm going to bring this one back completely, like so. And I'll bring this one forward and maybe down a little bit. And I'll bring this one back and then up a little bit. Just be random. Just remember, nature is the epitome of random. So don't be afraid to just have some fun with this and just do whatever feels right as far as the training goes. Okay, this glue is still not completely set. So while we're doing this, we're taking advantage of the fact that in maybe a minute or two, it is going to harden, and it's going to keep this training that we've done and make it pretty much permanent. Okay, so I've got 2 going back there, so I'm going to bring this one forward, just very gently, kind of working my way up, folding. I'm pulling it, essentially just pulling it towards me, but doing it in small little sections so that I'm not just creasing it right down the center. Trying to create a nice smooth curve. Okay, and we'll bring that one up a little bit. And then take this tip and point it in. Okay, so just random. You can see from the side how that looks. And then the cool thing is too, let me show you an example. This is why we do what we do. Okay, you look at this one in the light. You see how when the light hits it, it all almost looks like the same color throughout. But here, when we train it, depending on the angle of the light, like right here, there's a nice shadow here. Okay, there's a nice shadow there, a nice shadow right there on this leaf. And it's almost like you're inking it, but you're not. All you're doing is just creating shadows or creating or leaving alone highlights. Okay, so that really will set this off and just make it more interesting to the eye once everything is put together. There's a lot more to look at and try to absorb. Okay, so again, you're gonna need one of these with 2 layers for the left side of your final little candlescape, and then we're gonna need one more on this side. So I'm gonna walk you through that one more time, just so that, well, I may come across an additional tip or something that I maybe left out last time, so I may as well do it twice. You're gonna do this a total of 4 times, since again, you're doing this for both sides of the candlescape. All right, so again, starting off with just this part where the acorns are, just to get us nice and anchored, make life easy. Get that nice and lined up. Kind of using that little notch right there as a guide. Okay, get that nice and lined up. Get there, get there, get there. There we go. That works. Close enough. That's going to be covered up anyway. It's kind of just a little reference area. I'm going to take a look and see how this fits. That looks great. Perfect. So just as we did before, let's peel the top layer back. And let me clean off my nozzle here. Nozzle off. Mazel tov. Clean the nozzle off. Okay. And just a nice thin line right up the center. Make sure you get it all the way up to that tip. There we go. This really helps build your fine motor skills, or at least not build, just keep them sharp. It's good for your brain. The more I do this, the more I'm realizing how much this is helping my body in so many different ways. Working with your hands, it's almost become a lost art, especially with all the technology nowadays. It's just don't get me wrong, I'm probably one of the biggest technology junkies you'll ever meet, but it has its pros and cons. Okay, so we're just going to lay that down as you're working your way up. Just keep your focus on the first 2 sets of leaves. Once those are in place, go to the next 2, and then the next 2. Give it a little bit of a squeeze or a nudge or a pinch, whatever it takes to get those lined up accurately. There we go. That looks good. Again, if you're just seeing maybe a little bit like a hair's length or a hair's width of the paper underneath it, I wouldn't worry about it. No one's going to see that. And again, while the glue is starting to set, go ahead and start molding this and training it however you want. So this one's going to go back. I'm literally just taking and folding it back, using my thumb as pretty much a fulcrum. I guess you could also do this with a dowel, although I think for something like this with 2 layers, you risk possibly creasing it. I don't want to do that. I want to make it look natural, so like it's not made out of paper. I mean, it's always going to look like paper, but you know what I mean. I don't want it to be blatantly obvious. Okay, so we'll bring that back. We'll do this one forward and maybe bring it up. Just totally twist this thing like that. Just be random. You shouldn't have to think too much about this process. It should just be just a feeling, like an intuition, a gut feeling. There we go. And the last one here. And as I mentioned, We're gonna let this set, and by the time it's set, it'll solidify, and it's very unlikely that this is gonna move out of place anytime soon. And there we go, okay? So these two are gonna go on one side, and then these two are gonna go on the other side. Okay, so you can put those in your pile. Just kind of keep those separated. Move this out of the way. And technically, you know what we could do, and it's still windy here. It's been windy for like 2 weeks, I swear. These, you're gonna need 3 on each side. So I got 3 there, and we've got 3 here, right? And then we need 1 brown flower for that side, 1 brown flower for that side, 1 yellow, 1 yellow, 1 orange, 1 orange. And these are 2 piles for the 2 different sides. So put those off to the side. And we've got one more little thing to assemble before we work on our base, and then literally just put everything else together. So I've pre-assembled this one. And as you can see here, that same little notch contraption thing exists there as well. Essentially, eventually, we're going to be using that little notch as kind of a guide for placement, and it's going to go over like that. But make sure that you grab the 2 pieces that create this little shape here in the center. Technically, if you're using what's it called? If you're using textured cardstock, obviously that's not going to work. You can see that. That's not the same shape. This is an exact mirror. And if you put it this way, obviously it's not going to work because it's on the left. We need the corresponding piece for the right side, okay? So there are 2 of these, as I mentioned. I already finished one of them. So we're just going to do the other one here. And you can see when I put these together, it kind of creates that little shape right there, okay? But this, as you can see, sort of the same thing I did with the pomegranate little leaves here. Okay, I first started by giving this beautiful, that's an oak leaf. Yeah, that's an oak leaf, okay. Yeah, kind of creased this and shaped it a little bit so it's not so flat. You can see the shape you have there, as opposed to when it first comes off your machine, how flat it is. But here you've got a little bit of dimension to it, and this has been drying for probably about 30 minutes, so at this point I can really get even more crazy with it as far as how much I bend it, okay? At this point, we don't need to worry about that detail. All we need to worry about at this point is getting the little veins in place, which is what we're gonna do. So let me put this off to the side. Again, you're gonna do this a total of 4 times. I've already done it twice. You're gonna do it here, and then you're gonna do it on your other set. And all we need to do is put our little veins in place here. You'll notice that there is a little marker here at the bottom for the very tip of the vein. There are 2 little markers here that kind of sandwich in between where the veins split. And then the same thing up here. You're gonna pop that right in between. It's like 2 little U's. And this little tip here is gonna go right in between those U's. And where these little valleys are between the veins is where you're gonna line those little markers up, okay? So just like we did with the green leaves too, these guys, I'm gonna take and essentially give this a little bit of a curve just to start it off so that we don't overdo it once everything is glued in. Because remember, that glue is gonna solidify, and if you try to train it too much while it's solid, it may crack, and then things will kind of pull apart. And I've gone through this a million times and witnessed it and experienced it, so this is definitely the way to do it. Okay, so again, just kind of curving this up a little bit and then bringing this down a little bit so that we kind of create a little bit of an S shape. Okay, now as far as the vein goes, I don't think we need to really train this too much because it's a very thin piece and it's very malleable. It's not going to resist much at all. Now the important thing here to focus on is to make sure that you get that glue all the way out to the tips of the veins. We don't want those pulling apart. We can always go in and fix things here on the tips if in case, for some reason, we don't get enough glue and it pulls back, but you're leaving yourself open to getting glue in places you don't want it if you miss the tips. So let's try to make sure that we get good coverage on the tips of the veins before we place this down. Okay, all right. I'm going to begin by taking the very bottom of this and lining it up and holding it with my finger right in that little marker area. And then just literally just going to kind of pivot it whichever direction we need to pivot it to get it in between the rest of those markers. Okay, I'm going to press this down nice and firm to make sure it's making good contact. And then while the rest of it is setting, we can go ahead and continue kind of bending this gently. I'm going to bend it to the point where you're giving it that dimension, but not overdoing it to where the little veins are going to come off. Or if you do want to get a little more intense with it and give it a real good curve, maybe hold down the veins while you're manipulating that area so that the veins don't come loose and try to pull away from this part of our oak leaf. Okay, the idea is to keep the veins nice and flush and intact here while maintaining some sort of a curve. You can see how nice and curved that is. And then once this is really dried, we can always go in and curl the very tips of these to create that little game we were playing with the light and how it was creating nice shadows or increasing the highlights. We can do that later, but just make sure your vein is in place. I did fail to mention that I did hit this with a little bit of a red, but then also hit it with a purple tinge. I've noticed when I'm out photographing oak leaves, and maybe it's more maples, but either way, there's usually some sort of a two-tone effect with that. Okay, so we're gonna do the same thing with this one. I'm gonna go ahead and train these. Okay, and overall, this is going to come in, and then that's going to go outward. Okay, so all we have left here is our last little vein. Again, just take a moment and just make sure that you're getting that glue out to the very tips, because that, again, tends to be the most problematic part when working with little pieces like this. Just making sure that that is nice and anchored and sitting nice and flush. Here we go. Don't have to worry about getting every single inch of this covered. I am missing a little bit here though. There we go. Okay, so again, going to begin down here, get that right in place, and then just pivot until you get it in the right spot. And there we go. And press that down. I had a little bit of glue seep out of there, but the sooner you rub it off, the less likely it is that you'll get any sort of a blemish. So act swiftly. There we go. And this kind of little thin area over here, if you crease it and it's dangling like that, don't worry about it. It's all going to be hidden anyway by the layer that goes on top of it. So again, as this is drying, let's work on giving it a little bit of shape so that once it solidifies, it stays in that shape permanently. And you can see, I'm going to do it from this angle here so you can see kind of what I'm doing to shape it. Just play with it. I can't really give you exact instructions on what I'm doing, but essentially just trying to create it, create a nice little curve there so it's not so flat. And then again, once we get this in place, I'll go and I'll curl these little tips and give those a little bit of a flare as well. But that pretty much wraps it up for all of the little paper piecing sections. So again, take a look and make sure that you've got the 2 correct pieces for each side, and just put those in your corresponding piles so it's easier to figure out what we need later on. Okay, so I need you to find and situate these pieces like so. This is the actual platform for our candles. Right here on this surface that I'm touching right now, this is textured. Okay, this is the smooth side. This is smooth, this is textured. Because technically, when we put this together, we're going to be creating a little steps sort of situation here. I'll show you the prototype, and I'm going to go over something real quick just to kind of help you understand things. So you can see the prototype. Don't worry about the colors, but there's the side for that. And then if we rotate it this way, there's the side for that. Okay, there's other pieces that we still need to put in place, but this is side 1. This is the left side. So I've got 1L here. Side 1, right side. Left, right, because it's divided in two. If we flip it over, side 2 left, side 2 right. Side 1 left, side 1 right. Very simple, right? Okay, so here we have side 1 left, side 1 right. And if we were to flip it over, I think it's easier to do it this way. Side 2 left, side 2 right. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. I'm flipping it over as if it was assembled. Now, as far as the panels go, each side, side 1 and side 2, both need a panel. And on side 1, on the left, you want to make sure that you grab the panel that has a little L scored into it. So that's going to go there. And on side 1 on the right, you want the one that says R for right. That one's going there. And then when we flip it over, flipping it over to side 2 needs the little L panel on the left, and then the little R panel on the right, okay? I typically like to glue down the panels first while everything's flat, because I just get a better result that way, so that's what we're gonna do. So we've got the base structure here, and I'm gonna take this paper, get my glue on it, and get this glued into place. Okay. This is slightly embossed paper with some nice gold on it. I'm not exactly sure where this is from. I'm sure we have the information, and we'll try to supply it in the supply list. Sometimes it's not always possible, because just like you guys, we do have papers that have just been hanging out in our so-called stash that maybe we don't know where it came from. Okay, so we've got our glue on here. You'll notice that on this piece, we do have markers to help you with the positioning of this. Okay, so use them. They're in the corners there. They're little like L-shaped brackets, and we're using those to help guide us to make sure that everything is nice and lined up. Okay, so press that down. Now if I had my lucky handy little brayer here, that would speed things up for me. So I would use that. I like using a brayer on really large pieces like this. Helps spread the glue out, helps it dry faster too. Okay, so there's the first one. Now we'll grab the other side of this and get that glued into place. Okay. And again, using the little markers there to help us get this nice and aligned all the way around. Press that down. Okay. Good. All right, so we're gonna do the same thing to the other side here. I'm gonna let that dry nice and flat. I'm gonna put this underneath my mat so that it dries nice and flat for me while I'm working on this other one here. Okay, so same thing here. Now that we've identified which panel goes where, we just get our glue on there, get it into place, and then putting the structure together will not be difficult at all. It's essentially just putting together a odd-shaped box, and many of you have made tons of boxes with us over the years, so I'm not at all concerned about the odd shape of this box here. Okay, again, make sure you focus on those little markers just to make sure that we get everything nice and lined up. That is actually going to come in a little handy once we start putting our decorative elements on the front and back of this thing. It'll help keep everything nice and symmetrical. So definitely do your best to get this panel into the right spot. Okay, and where the heck did I put the other ones? Oh, that's right. Put them underneath my thing. Boy, it's been a rough week. Okay, let's get this one on here. Okay, I'm going to start over here. It's a little more convenient for how I'm holding it. Get that lined up, and wouldn't you know it, that fit nicely. There we go. Okay, I'll press that down into place. So our panels are in place, and now we're getting into some dimensional work. And finally, we get to put all of the beautiful things that we made onto the final product here. All right, so I'm going to put these underneath my mat, let them dry flat. I'm going to take the other ones out, and we'll start with this. Should be nice and dry by now. Okay, so what we need to do now is find one of the piles where we've got the 1, 2, and 3. Let me grab the Roman numeral ones so you can see in case you forgot. 1, 2, 3, and then this long piece. This is our bottom. That's going to go on last. And we're going to need these two pieces that we just put the panels on. We're going to use those in a second. But first, we're going to glue sections 1, 2, and 3 all together to make them one continuous piece. Okay. So just lay them out like this, 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so we have 1, 2, and 3 lined up. We're going to take some glue and apply it to the tab with the Roman numeral 2 on it. And let's make sure that we get plenty of glue on here. You don't want it thick and globby, but just enough. Let's spread that glue all the way out to this very edge here so that when we get it together, it looks nice and flush. Sorry, I was concentrating there. Okay. Now I'm going to take it and fold it onto itself at that seam. And the reason for that is so I can press down right there. And also, you'll notice that these tabs here, this angle, should meet perfectly with the one right behind it. And that's a good indicator that you've got everything perfectly lined up. Okay, so there we have piece 1 and 2 connected. Now we're going to do the same thing with piece number 3. Okay, so let's get our glue on tab number 3. This is I believe this is the back of this structure, pretty sure. Get that glue out to the very edges here. You'll notice that I did mark those up, or I darkened them in, I should say. And that's okay because they're going to be hidden. Those are just tabs. So if it's easier for you to see that and you want to kind of darken them in so you don't lose track, you can do that. No one's ever going to see that again. That pour number 3 will be hidden forever. Okay, there we go. Okay, all right, so got that all set. Now we're going to take one of these sides here. We'll just say that this is the front, okay? And again, this is in fact the back part, okay? And then you can see here how this is going to form. And we're just going to glue one tab at a time, so don't worry about it. I'm just trying to demonstrate how this is ultimately going to look, but that might be a little bit too much to do at this time. So let's just start with one thing here. Find the longest tab. This is connected to, I believe this is piece number 3. Doesn't matter though. There's no tab this long. So we're gonna do that first. So go ahead and get some glue on this tab. Okay. And we're gonna do this whole process twice because, well, there's a left and a right side, remember. Okay, so let me get that glue out to the very edges here. Beautiful. And we can do this one flat for now. It's probably the only one we'll be able to do flat, but that's okay. That way we've got a solid foundation, a nice solid start for the rest of the assembly here. Get that lined up as accurately as you can. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and fold it over onto itself and check my seam up here. Give it a little bit of a nudge if necessary. I actually did a pretty good job of lining that up, so I don't need to make any adjustments. There we go. Okay, great. So that is in place. Nice clean seam. And now, to move that out of the way, we're going to start by taking this tab and gluing it right to the inside of this section. So actually, now that it's anchored, you can see what we're trying to accomplish here. We're essentially just making this like that. Very simple. Very, very simple. Okay. So let's get our glue on the next tab here. A nice thin line up to the top. Like so. Just like that. Okay. And bring that in. Get it nice and aligned. Like so. And then once you have it aligned, and you're sure it's aligned, you can flip it over and press down from the inside. We're going to leave the bottom open so we can always get our hand in there. Okay, great. And that looks really good. So next, moving on to the next tab here, just going to get our glue on this tab here. Going to work some of that glue right out to the very, very edge. And we're going to tuck that under. Get that nice and lined up. Can move that out of the way a little bit. You just press that down, give it a second, and you can push up from the inside, and then you can kind of hold it. I'm pressing down here, and I'm holding it here so I can flip it over without it coming loose, and press down from the inside using my table for additional leverage. There we go, perfect. And that looks great. Moving on to the next tab. I think you get the idea now. So it looks kind of weird, but it's really not. Okay, painting that glue out to the edge. We're going to tuck that under. Get it nice and lined up, like so. Perfect. Stick your hand in underneath so you can push up on that tab while pushing down from the top. And I'm holding it, kind of sandwiching it now. I'm going to flip it over and press down from the inside. You don't have to do it this way. I just prefer to because I know, based on doing this thousands of times, that things tend to set quicker and dry faster when you really push that glue into the paper and all of the little fibers in there. Okay, so moving on to the next tab. Nice thin little line up to the edge. Paint that glue out. Okay, and tuck that in. Get it nice and lined up. Okay, sorry about my head there. I'm pushing up from the inside, down from the outside, holding it, sandwiching it, flipping it over. There we go. There we go. Okay, just a couple more tabs here. You know, while I shoot these videos in 20-minute increments because that's what my camera allows, and sometimes in between takes I'll take a break. I was just on Facebook looking at some of your comments from my post about how therapeutic this process is, especially after a week of chaos that I just had, and was reading many of your stories about how you guys find crafting to be therapeutic and it just really made me feel a lot better reading your stories. So thank you for sharing all those. Okay, that just leaves one more tab here. So let's get that glued down. And then the other side, we have to put the other side of this on in just a moment. I'll show you how that goes together. And just line that up, just like that. Give that a squeeze. You can flip it over and press down from the inside. There we go. Beautiful. Okay. All right, so now just need to take this piece and pop this on here and close it up. And just like we did with the other side, we're going to begin by anchoring this to the longest tab first, just so that it's easier to work with the rest of the way. Okay, so let me get my glue and clean off that nozzle and get that glue on here. There we go. Spread that glue out to the very edges. Get that nice and lined up. Make sure that when you're lining the top, that everything looks nice and flush up there. Nice and flush up against the edge. And that looks pretty darn good. I can put this down flat now and press down here. Okay, so now here is where, well, it's not going to be tough. It's going to be a little bit tougher, but not necessarily. Okay, now because we're not going to really be able to pull this back too much, well, I guess technically we probably could actually. You know what? So let me see. Yeah, that's not so bad. Tell you what, let's glue these two tabs in place first, just so that we're not trying to do all these tabs all at once. And then I'll show you a little trick that we can do here to make things a little bit easier. So I'm just putting glue on the next two tabs here. We're going to work on the first step, so to speak. Okay, and get that nice and lined up. So we're focusing on this area here. You just gave that a little bit of a nudge to get that in place. And if you need to push it outward a little bit, you can do that as well. Okay, just make sure that those tabs are in the correct spot. Give it a second for that glue to kind of activate its tackiness. And then what we're going to do is we're going to flip it over, put it down on our surface, and press down from the inside to really get that to stick. Okay, and this way, we're not trying to do too much at once, which will lead to less mistakes that will ultimately lead to a better looking, more polished product. Okay, there we go. Okay, so we've got those all set. Now, what I'm thinking about doing here is you're gonna grab a scrap piece of paper. We're gonna get a little bit of glue right on the scrap piece here, just in one of the corners. Leave that on the side for now. We're gonna use that in a second. I'm gonna flip this up, just pull it back a little bit. Don't overdo it. You don't wanna rip it off the area where we just glued. And add glue to the tabs that you can comfortably add them to without risking pulling this apart too much. Okay, so I'm doing it on these three here. I'm going to take my finger and get that glue out to the edges. Okay, I had a little excess on there, so I'm taking it and putting it on the tab that doesn't have any glue on it. Now here is that little scrap piece of paper. I'm just going to slide that under and paint it onto this tab. Just paint a little bit of glue right onto that tab. Okay, so all the tabs now have glue, and you can now get them all in place and press down. And hopefully it all ends up looking nice. And that came out pretty good, actually. There we go. Okay, so now we can actually flip this over and push down from the inside on those tabs that we just had glue on to help that stick a lot quicker. And then we'll check our work, and if we do have any little areas that maybe are not making the best contact and aren't in place as cleanly as we would like, we can always go in and do a little bit of cleanup. But that actually worked out very well. There's one little area here that maybe isn't sitting the way I want it to. So just a tiny little bit of glue on my scrap piece of paper. And actually, you know what? I'm gonna need something thinner than that because of, I'm just gonna rip this a little bit. It's a tiny little piece of scrap paper, a little bit of glue, and we're just gonna pop it right into this little corner that's lifted up a little bit. There we go, just like that. Paint a little bit of glue in there and just press and hold that down, and that'll take care of that. Okay, otherwise, it looks pretty darn good. There's one more little area here that I could probably use a little touch-up. But again, I'm probably going OCD right now because I have that. I've had it all my life, I think. And I'll press that down and hold it, let that set. I just want it to look nice and crisp and clean. Okay, perfect. All right, so that's it. Box is pretty much done with the exception of our bottom, which we're gonna put in place now. And we're gonna start with a long side and just one side to get it anchored to make the rest of the process go smoothly. So let's grab our glue and apply it to one of the long tabs, doesn't matter which side. Just like that. Nice thin line right along the edge. I'm gonna paint that out nice and thin all the way to the very edge so that we have a nice clean bottom. It's always good to have a nice clean bottom. Okay, all right, so get that lined up. Take this piece, nudge it right up to the very edge there, make sure it's centered. There we go. And press that down into place. Make sure it's making good contact, especially right along the very, very edge. Give that glue a second to set, and then you can flip it down and press down from the inside. Really get it in there. Okay. There we go. And that looks pretty good. And sometimes, you know, actually, sometimes when you use too much glue on something, it turns out that you would think it would stick better, but it actually doesn't. It tends to kind of warp sometimes. Okay, so we're going to close up the bottom now, and we need to put glue on the remaining 3 tabs. So I'm going to do a little curly Q on this entire tab. I'm going to go a little bit easier on the glue here. And then a nice thin line along the bottom. And we're going to spread that glue out to the very edge. That is already drying up. I'm going to need to get a little more glue on that. You can tell, you can kind of feel with your finger the consistency and the tackiness of the glue. And sometimes if it's too tacky, chances are it may not stick or grab at all. Okay, you can flare these out a little bit. Go ahead and close this up. Focus on aligning it to this side, the side opposite of the side that is already hinged and anchored. Focus on that. And then the rest of it should just kind of fall into place. Be very gentle with this. Don't push too much on the inside. Focus your pressure along the perimeter here. Okay, and if for some reason we have any little areas that are lifting up, we have our scrap piece of paper. We can always go in and give those little areas a little extra TLC and clean them up. Okay, just be patient. A lot of surface area here, so just kind of work your way around clockwise or counterclockwise, all the way around, making sure that everything is making good contact there. And yeah, that's pretty solid. I have maybe one tiny little area here that I'm just going to put a little bit of scrap paper with some glue on and then press and hold that down to clean that up. No one's really going to be looking at the bottom, and for the most part, a lot of this is going to be covered up by the all the decorations and stuff that we're going to put on here, but that's it for this platform. Okay, so we need to do that one more time with the other side because we're building 2 of these, remember. Okay, now if you don't want to follow along while I do this again, I'm going to kind of skip around here for a second, and we're going to put these panels on. You'll notice that these panels, they are all the same, okay, and each one is going to require 3. And the way this works is, obviously there's a fold here. The fold is going to go right here at the edge of the step, and you're just going to glue that on nice and centered. Okay, so two ways of doing this. You can put glue on the whole thing if you want, or you can just do it in sections. That might actually be easier. So I'm going to start by doing it in sections, and then I'm also going to do it in one fell swoop and let you know maybe which one is easier. So I'm going to start by putting glue on the larger part, which is the actual step itself. And just make sure that you get that nice and centered so that you have an equal amount of, in my case, it's AC vanilla, but whatever your color is, make sure you've got a nice even border on both sides. And just press and hold that down. Again, anytime you can kind of break things down methodically into smaller steps, you're going to end up doing better work because you can really focus on the task at hand and not worry about the next section because it's, you know, well, there's a score mark there and it needs to be folded this way and this and that. So that worked out. That was actually very easy. Now I'm just going to put glue on the remainder of this. And because we used this crease to help with the alignment and placement, all we need to do is just fold this over. And now that's in place. So that was actually very easy. I'd probably recommend doing it that way because that looks pretty darn flawless. That looks really nice with the embossing too. Okay, so that looks great. Now let's try it with the other method where I put glue on the whole thing. But you can see essentially what we're doing here. And when you're placing the next panel, if you were off a little bit, just make sure that this next one is lined up properly. Okay, so this time I'm going to put glue on the whole thing and glue the whole thing down in one fell swoop, and we'll see which way is easier. Okay, so doing this one in one fell swoop where I glued both sides was pretty much just as easy as you know, separating it into two steps. So whichever way you want to do it seems to be pretty much the same. Whatever you feel comfortable with. I'm just going to do both at the same time. I think if it was maybe, you know, 3 sides, 4 sides, or a hexagon or something, I'd probably want to do it and be a little more segmented as far as the application goes, but I think that's fine. Okay, so I've got glue on both sides here, and just making sure that this is pushed up all the way against this little edge here, just to make sure that everything sits nice and flush, and then just running my fingers across the entire piece here, especially the very edges, just to make sure that everything is making good contact. Okay, you can see how that, when that light hits that embossing, how nice that looks. Almost looks like a pattern paper, but it won't overpower the candle when it's there. And actually, when that candle is there, I bet that it really highlights this nice embossing. Okay, so the first side is correct, it's done. And the only thing we need to focus on now when we put these together is to make sure that we have the letters in the correct spot. Okay, all right, so that's done. We're gonna repeat that one more time. Again, if you wanna do this on your own, this would be a good time to skip ahead. You don't need to watch me do this again. I'm gonna fill this in just in case you are watching from start to finish here. This is the number 2, and this is 3. Okay, so we're gonna lay these out, 1, 2, 3. We're gonna start with the tab number 2 and apply our glue. And I'm gonna spread that glue out all the way to the edge and tuck that underneath the right side of piece 1 and get that nice and aligned. Now what I'm looking at right now as far as my focus is just making sure that this line here for these tabs is on the same plane. If you have a little ruler on your mat, you can definitely use that as a guide as well, just for perfect placement. And then I'm going to go ahead and fold it over onto itself right at that seam. I'll press down here, and while I'm doing that, you can see that these tabs and the angle right here matches up with the one right behind it. And that's another indicator that you've got it spot on. Okay, let me tuck my chair in a little more. I feel like I'm floating away from the table here. Okay, so piece 1 and 2 are now connected. And we're going to take piece number 3, apply our glue to tab number 3 here. Nice thin line right out to the edge. I'm going to paint that glue. And I'll tuck that right under and get that glued in place. Use my little markers here, my guides on my mat. Make sure I've got that lined up nicely. And fold it over onto itself. Again, you can check the angles on the tabs. Should be spot on. If they're a smidge off, it's okay, but you want to try to get it on as accurate as you can. There we go. And there we have it. Okay. So just like we did the first time, now these panels have been under here, drying nice and flat for us. Okay, so again, this longest tab here, this is our back. So we know where that's going to go. It's going to go here. And then the rest of it, little steps, just have to put those together. So let's jump right in here and get this anchored to the longest tab. And get that glue spread out. There we go. Beautiful. And grab this piece and get that nice and lined up. You can technically do this flat, but it's okay. Gotta make sure that's nice and centered right on that tab. You can put that down flat and press. There we go. Fold that in, look at that seam. There we go, okay. All right, and back to what we were doing before, where we're just going one tab at a time here to get that nice and anchored, assembled, I should say. It's already anchored. Okay, put the glue on the next tab, tuck it in there. You can move this out of the way so you can get your finger in there and get that aligned nicely with the top step. Okay, feels good. Hold it for a second, flip it over, and you can push down from the inside. Get that in place a lot quicker. And I'm just going to use this tool right here to add some additional pressure to that little corner right there. There we go. Beautiful. All right, moving right along. Next tab here. I think my bottle's getting dirty. Okay. And get that nice and lined up with the face of our top step. There we go. Now once that glue starts to get a little tacky, you can go ahead and flip it down and push down from the inside. Move this out of the way so you can see what I'm doing. There you can see there, I'm just pushing the tab down into place right there from the inside. And that looks good. Okay, bring out the next tab and just continue, keep on rolling here. So, yeah, you know, and I didn't really want to talk about how this year's Thanksgiving is going to be altered by COVID, because I want these videos to be kind of timeless, but you know what, this could be like a little time capsule and can't help but talk about it. But I know that a lot of people that actually, and I've read some stories from you guys in the group, you know, because of COVID, you haven't seen your families in a long time. So hopefully, well, can't anticipate that they'll have things figured out by Thanksgiving, but let's just hope and pray that they do. And if they don't, well, can at least send them a card. And you could probably send this in the mail too if you want to make them something nice. And thank goodness, you know, one positive that came out of all this is the fact that we're all using video technology to stay in touch, which is nice. Okay, so I've got glue on this next tab, tucking it under, right behind here. Give that a little squeeze from the inside. I'm pushing down from the inside to push that tab up against the inner wall of this section here, and then press that down. But I guess I've been using video chat technology for a long time to stay in touch with family. I have a sister who lives out of state, and yeah, but you know, it's not quite the same, but I guess it's better than nothing. So anyway, it's been a weird year to say the least. All right, next tab. We'll spread that glue out to the edges, bring that down right here, tuck it right behind this section here, get that nice and lined up, and press that down. Okay, and that just leaves this little guy here. Let's get him in place. So I have been reading more of your stories as the comments come in, and I'm just blessed and honored that you guys find so much happiness and relief. Some of you called it therapy, your Zen, whatever it may be. I'm just humbled and honored to be able to provide a website that can do that for you. It's definitely, I've accepted the fact that this is my life's work, and I have no regrets at all. I really love being able to do this. So thank you for letting me into your homes. Okay, we've got that set. So just like we did on the other side, just have to close this up now. And as I mentioned before, I'm going to start with the longest tab, because that's going to set the tone for everything else. So get your glue on that tab. Nice thin little line right out to the edge. Let's kind of paint that out. That just helps things look nice and crisp. Almost like it was 3D printed, except it wasn't. You're the little 3D printer. Okay, make sure that that is nice and centered, nice and lined up against that edge. I can put this down on my surface and press down from the inside. Speed things along a bit. There we go. And that looks sharp and solid. All right, so just like we did last time, I'm going to do these first two tabs here and get these anchored first, so we don't have to try to do all of them at the same time. That could be a disaster. You can try it if you'd like. You can put glue on all of them and try to close this up in one fell swoop. I don't know what the success rate would be, but I have a feeling that this will probably just be a little easier. Okay, so bring that down onto those tabs. Make sure that you've got a nice 90-degree angle there to create that step. You can tuck your hand inside, kind of nudge the wall of the step in or out, depending on where it needs to go. And then you can push. I'm pushing up on that tab that I just put glued on. My finger under here is pushing up against my finger that's on top. And same thing here. And you can also flip it over now and push down so as not to crease the project. Okay, there we go. All right, so we've got these two sections here glued down. This little area needs a little extra love here. I'm gonna be patient so I don't goof it up. There we go. Okay, and just like we did last time, I'm gonna grab a scrap piece of paper and throw a little bit of glue right on the very edge of this, like so. Leave that off to the side. And then we're going to apply glue to the remaining tabs here. I'm going to lift this up gently. Okay, and I'm going to use my glue to apply glue to this tab, and this tab. The other one, we're going to use our little scrap piece of paper to apply the glue. It's a little weird, but it's not that bad. Okay, and I've got glue on my fingers. Okay, so I'm going to spread that glue around, especially out to the very edges of these tabs. And because we have less control over where our glue goes, if you throw a little extra glue on these tabs, it's not the end of the world, and actually it'll buy you a little more time. Okay, so that one tab there that we didn't put any glue on, this is where I'm going to use my scrap piece, and I'm just going to go ahead and paint some glue on there. And there's a good chance that I may need to reapply and throw a little bit of extra over here on this side, just like that. Okay, so work your way, starting with this step here. Get your glue on there. It's already on there. Just go ahead and line it up now. Push that tab up against the inside, and then come down here. Get this one aligned, and then finally this guy down here. See, like sometimes when you apply the glue, the longer you wait, the tackier it gets, and the quicker it grabs. So that's why we're having so much success right now. The nature of this glue and the properties of it really lend itself to working with paper. And that, look at that, that actually went on perfectly. Okay, we can flip this over and push on those tabs from the inside, speed up the process a little bit. Here we go. And as always, check your work. Look for any areas where it might not be flush or peeling back. That looks perfect, actually. If you do have any areas that maybe are, peeling back or not completely flush, just throw a little bit of glue onto a scrap piece of paper, shove it right in between those two layers, paint a little bit of glue, and then just press and hold it down, and you're all good. Okay, so now I'm gonna pop this on. Just like last time, we're gonna start with one of the larger tabs to get it anchored. So I'll just start with this one, doesn't matter which one. Just like that. And we'll do a nice thin line out to the edge. Take that glue, paint it right out to the perimeter, and grab this long piece and just do your best to get that nice and centered. There we go. And press that down. Just make sure that it is nicely aligned. That looks good. And just continue to kind of run your finger along the very edge there, so that makes really good contact with that tab. That looks good. We can flip this down now and push down from the inside. Get the rest of that tab to take hold. Okay. And then let's take a look at our work here. We got a few little areas that I should probably hold a little bit longer because it is kind of not sitting totally flat, but it will in just a moment. There we go. Okay, and let's finish it off by getting glue on the remaining 3 tabs and closing it up. So we're almost to the fun part here now. I've done all this work, especially with our leaves and all of the nice little embellishments that are going to go on the front. We can put those in place and finish this thing off. Almost there. Okay, so I'm just going to spread that glue out to the very edges. There we go. Beautiful. Okay, so we're going to close this up now by flipping this over. You want to focus on aligning it with this side, the side opposite of the side that is already hinged. You can lift these up a little bit so as you push down, it grabs more of that surface area. Since we can't really stick our hand inside, that would be helpful. And there we go. If you need to kind of nudge the walls in a little bit, now is the time. And just continue to kind of run your finger along the perimeter, because that is the most important thing visually, to make sure that everything's sitting nice and flush. And if you don't succeed, don't worry, we've got that scrap piece. You can always go in and tidy things up. Talk about a way to keep your mind sharp. It's like, actually kind of equate this to like doing a crossword puzzle, I'd say, but you're getting your You get your hands involved too, hand-eye coordination, keeping you sharp. Okay, I've got one little area there that I'm not really digging. It's not sitting flat. Literally just a tiny little bit of glue right here on the corner. Stick it right in there where it's not sitting flat. Just shove some extra glue in there and then press and hold that down. Give that area a little extra love. Everything else looks solid. And there we go. Okay, so all that's left now is I'm going to put the little panels on our steps. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to line this one up here so that when I get this one here, I can kind of use the other one as a reference for placement. In case you're off a little bit, you can use that one to guide you to be consistently off. If you didn't get it totally centered, at least you can continue with the off-centeredness, so to speak. Okay, so we're getting glue on the back of our little step panel. And, well, do as I say, not as I do. There we go. Now I'm using a vanilla color, which is very forgiving when it comes to, you know, if you get glue all over the place, you don't see it as bad. But not that we have to worry about that because we're very careful, aren't we? Okay, all we have left to do here is get the last two panels on. And before we actually begin putting all of the floral on the front and back, we're going to glue these two pieces together and we're going to let them sit until we're sure that everything is nice and dry. You can use hot glue if you'd like. I personally am just going to stick to the glue. I think it's just as strong, if not stronger, to be honest with you. I know hot glue just dries a lot faster and keeps things moving, but I don't trust it. And it's kind of annoying, to be honest with you. I'm totally sold on my Scotch Quick Dry, keeping things together. I mean, I've got projects, and I've seen projects that are over 10 years old now that are still holding up nicely. So this is definitely not something that, you know, will just kind of disintegrate overnight. Longevity is, you know, on par with pretty much anything you'd buy at the store. And the cool thing is you're not using as many resources from the earth. And if you're done with it at some point, well, you've got some really nice kindling. All right, so our last panel is in place. Our structure is complete. And like I said, we're going to go ahead and glue these two pieces together to kind of join them and make it one. All right, now again, let's just check our work here. When we lay these side by side, we should have an L here and an R here, okay? And again, we're just gonna, this seam in the center is gonna get covered up by all of our floral, so it's not a big deal. And up here, of course, you're gonna see a seam there, but it's not a huge deal. So, get these glued together. Go ahead and just, we're gonna put glue on the side, inside here. And it's okay to go kind of heavy with the glue here. And we also want to make sure that we get some glue out to the very edge so that we can make this look as seamless as possible. Okay, so I've got glue, you can see it there. And I might even have to go a little bit heavier because this is, it's gonna have to do a lot of work. And I'm gonna take that glue, spread it out to the very corners and edges here so that when the two ends meet, it'll be nice and crisp. Again, double check, make sure you got an L and an R, left, right, and we'll pop these together. I'm using my thumb down here as kind of a guide to make sure that they're on the same plane there. And then I can kind of just give them a push and just push and hold them together. You can put it down on your table too and make sure that they're nice and centered. And now they're going to be definitely going to be flat because we're using a table as our guide. There we go. And just kind of give it a little bit of a push inward for, well, maybe, I don't know, 30 seconds or so, maybe a minute, just to make sure that it's really making good contact. This thing's very sturdy, actually. Okay. Yay, now we're on to the fun part. Okay, so we're gonna let this set for a couple minutes. Looks nice and flush on the bottom. It's sitting very flat. Look at, that's very impressive actually, a very impressive size. I mean, I can hide behind it. That looks really nice. Very cool. Wait till we put all the leaves on here. All right, so we're gonna let this cure for maybe another minute or two, and then we can begin with the fun part. Okay, time for the fun part. All right, so let's pick a side, any side. Call this side 1. And again, I've got my pile right here of everything that goes onto one of the sides. Now, the first thing we need to do is we need to put our nice little oak leaf in place here. And we've got markers to help you along the way here. So you'll notice that part of this is actually sticking up beyond the border of this wall. So we don't want to put glue on the entire leaf here. We'll kind of keep it just below these 2 little hills. Okay, so get your glue. Definitely want some glue on the stem. And then down here, obviously. And a little bit up here. And then just kind of keep it right about in that area there. Okay. And again, using the little markers there. Let's get those in place. There's also a little marker for where the stem goes. So we'll get that in place. And you want to make sure that it's not pointing up. It's kind of arcing down, arching. And we'll do the same thing on the other side. So we'll just kind of do this symmetrically, just one at a time here. Well, you kind of have to. Okay, there we go. And find the little marker there for the stem, and then you can kind of just pivot it into place. There we go. Okay. All right, next layer is our beautiful oak leaves. And you will notice also here that we have some markers. Now, the edge of this is going to be lined up with the very edge of the box itself. So they're going to kind of meet in the middle. And there's a little marker here. It's kind of like it's a hill or a valley, depending on which way you look at it. But it corresponds with this little area here, and I'll point to it. This little dip here. And you just want to get that lined up. And it's going to help you get the horizontal orientation correctly. There's also a little marker here that corresponds with this little dip right here. Okay, so that's how you know. That's how you know where to put that. Now, we're going to glue down just this part here with the acorns, and we're going to leave the leaf loose because we're going to use some foam squares to adhere that to the actual base, because again, we want to give this a little bit of life as far as dimension and training and all that jazz goes. So we're going to leave that. We're just going to put glue on that little section there, using the markers here to get the alignment correct. Make sure that the edge of this is flush with the edge of the box on the right in the center there, because we want these two to meet in the center. And then press that down. Okay. And now what we can do, we can kind of see how we can curl this or push this in. Once this is fully dried, we went all the way up here, we can push that in, and with a foam square, it'll keep it nice and dimensional like that. That looks not too bad the way it is because we trained it. You can see that there's a little bit of separation there, but we can absolutely push that in a little bit more even and get that to just kind of use that as use that as a shaping tool. So I've got a foam square here. I'm going to put it on the back of my oak leaf. I'm going to peel that off, and then I accidentally stuck it. I'm just going to push this in, figure out how much curve I want on it, and we're going to go right about there. There. Now look at that. Okay, you see how much more dimension we've added to that. Once all said and done, again, we can go in and curl these, peel these little sections back even more. But that's ultimately what we wanted to do. And now we're going to go over here on this side and glue this into place. Again, we do have markers there. Let me see if I can Figure out where those markers are. There they are. Okay. Well, obviously you just want to basically nudge that up and butt it up right up against the other one. Okay, and that's essentially where we want it. So let's go ahead and put some glue on this section here, on the entire little acorn, and this little piece here. Okay. And again, just bring it all the way over until it touches and meets up with its other half. There we go, perfect. And again, that's that little shape that we need to create. That's how we know we've got the right sides on the right place. Okay, so that's good. Again, we didn't touch our leaf so that we can take it. And now this one I didn't shape as much, so I can go ahead and do that now though. No harm in that. Take my dowel and just use that as a tool to kind of push the leaf down, give it a little bit of a curve. Okay, and it's okay if it's not exactly curved like the other one. We want this to be natural. After all, it is nature. Okay, so we'll grab our foam square. I'm going to pop that pretty much in the same exact spot on the back here and peel off that backing. I'll put this flat on my surface here, and I'm going to give that a push in. Try to just recreate that same look. Try to keep things nice and symmetrical, and look at that. That looks pretty darn spot on. Okay. All right, great. So that's that. And next is, let me take a look here, make sure I'm doing this right. We've got these guys here, okay? And you can kind of see here what we're doing. I'm just gonna lay that right on top. We're simply just applying glue to the acorns again and getting that in place. And this is pretty stiff as it is. If we wanted to, we could probably put like a little foam square maybe here, or maybe up against this oak leaf, just so that this thing doesn't move around so much. We can decide that later. We don't need to figure all that out right now. Let's just make this pretty. And we'll put glue on our acorn all the way on the entire acorn here. I want this to have a really good hold. Okay, just line that up with the corresponding shadow layer that I have in orange right now. Give that a little nudge, press and hold that down. Okay, there we go. Yeah, I think the best place for a little foam square would be right there. Or if you have some Zots, probably gonna use a Zot. Again, I can do that later. And then we'll grab the other side and get that in place. Just matching it up just like we did the other side. Grab your glue. And just get that glue on the entire shadow of our acorn. Don't be shy with the glue with this. It is kind of doing a lot of work down here, holding up the rest of the little leaves and such. And you're gonna just pop that right on there, right up against the other side there. And press and hold that down into place. So far so good. Look at that. That looks nice. Okay. Wonderful. All right, so now, okay, so this green leaf is gonna go on next, and that is just gonna go right up at the top here. You can see the bottom of this here is gonna line up with the top acorn, and we wanna get that nice and centered. You can glue that down flat, or if you want, you can just throw a couple foam squares on there to give this a little added dimension. You wanna make sure that you keep the foam squares just in this little area here. You don't want to put anything on the leaf here because that leaf is going to be, well, just kind of hanging there. Okay, and do your best to get that nice and centered and aligned. And take a look at this line going up and make sure that the leaf is in fact lined up and nice and symmetrical. Here we go. And actually, you know what? Yeah, here we go. We need to pull this out. That needs to go in front of this. There we go. Okay, so far so good. And this actually gives us more areas to use some foam squares or some Zots to keep this thing from wobbling around. Okay, so looking at it now, this might be a good spot for it right here. Nevertheless, let's just finish this off by putting, let me see how we got this done here. Okay, we're going to grab our 2 acorns, and those are going to go here like so. And I'm going to double layer this as far as the Zots go. So I'm going to do 1 layer here and then a 2nd layer. So I'm putting stacking 2 Zots or 2 foam squares, one on top of the other to make this 2 layers thick. Okay, like that. And we're just going to line that up like this. Make sure that you get that nice and centered. There we go, look at that. Okay. And then for this final little acorn here, this one's going to come out even more, so we're going to do 3 layers on this. Let me peel that off. Do the 2nd layer, peel that off. Do the 3rd layer, peel that off. No one's going to see that. And we're going to pop that right into place right here. And there we go. Okay, is that it? That is it. Okay, so we're going to repeat that same process as far as putting these down on the other side. At this point, I think you kind of understand how it works. So you can go ahead and if you need to, just rewind it, go back and just repeat the same process for the other side. And finally, all we need to do, because we have some flowers here, need to glue the flowers onto the little sections here. Okay, we're going to start off by doing the brown one. Let me go to the other angle here. Whoops. We're going to go brown here, and then we're going to go yellow or mustard here, and then the bottom is going to be your apricot, like that. I'm going to do the same thing on both sides. Okay, so let me see here. Let me just get that in place, show you what it looks like. And I am going to actually, I don't know if we did foam squares. Now we just glued them down. So just a little bit of glue on the back of your flower. And for this one, I'm going to a little bit of it is going to be sticking up beyond the step. And that's actually true on all the sides here. Let me show you. Okay, you can see how it's kind of sticking up. But just make sure that you get it nice and centered. That is the ultimate goal here. You can bring that down a little bit more, actually. Okay, there we go. Is that centered, Leo? Yeah, it looks more like it. Okay, then we're going to go with our nice mustard color on the 2nd layer. Throw a little bit of glue right on the back. And I'm going to pop that right in place, nice and centered. Try to keep them roughly at the same height. And press that into place. Okay, I'll show you what that looks like here in a second. You can see it from that angle. Okay, and then finally we have our nice, brilliant apricot color with the fine inking. And obviously you want to keep that so it's not going beyond the bottom of the structure. We don't want that hitting the table or wherever it's going to be. Get that nice and centered. I'm going to hold that in place for a minute. So there, that's what that's going to look like. That is what the front looks like. And again, you can do the same thing with the flowers on this side. So we're going to start with, in my case, the brown sugar, then we're going mustard, and then we're going apricot. Well, take a look at this beautiful little autumn/Thanksgiving centerpiece. I've got the little candles on here. You can probably see them better from the top-down angle as these lights are really bright, but if you picture this in your dining room for Thanksgiving, a nice dimly lit setting, not overly bright, especially in the evening, it will definitely be, definitely be a conversation piece. You can say you made it yourself. It's a really good size for the center of a table. You could probably decorate it or, you know, kind of maybe throw some acorns or something around it. Find a nice little placemat to put this on. You know, maybe get some twigs or some other sort of floral to put around it to kind of create a whole scene. But as you can see here, I did do the same thing on the other side as far as all the floral goes. So that's all in place. Again, the steps are exactly the same. It's identical. And if you want, take a look at the final project here. And depending on how you curled and trained things, if you feel that you need to maybe say take another foam square, and let's say for example this leaf here, if this one's sticking out too much, pop another little foam square in there and just press it up against the actual structure. That way it won't sag too much. And again, if you want, like right now for example on these oak leaves, if you want to take, and I can't tilt it right now, so I'm gonna have to show you from maybe this angle. If you want to train these a little bit more, you can feel free to just take a dowel and kind of curl the tips just to make them a little more interesting so they're not so flat. Totally optional. There's so much going on here that, well, it's kind of a feast for the eyes. And one more thing that you can do, and I don't know if you can see it here, I'll show you from this angle. You'll notice that I threw some rhinestones in the centers of the little flowers there just to kind of jazz those up a bit. And you can pull the petals back or towards you away from the back layer to thicken and kind of fluff those up, make them look more full. It's your project. You can do with it whatever you'd like to make it your own. And with that said, thank you so much for joining me. If you enjoyed this video, you can check out many more on our YouTube channel. So make sure you head on over there. And you're probably watching this on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of our future releases, whether it be a paid or a freebie, one of our educational videos, tutorials. And if you make this or anything from our new bundle, I would love to see it, and so would the 23,000 plus other dreamers that inspire us daily. So head on over to your Facebook page and do a search for Dreaming Tree Group, or you can type in this little URL here. It'll take you right to the group. So again, happy Thanksgiving. I hope it's a good one. Well, it's not Thanksgiving yet, but you're prepping for it. Make it a good one, make it beautiful, make it your own. And as always, I look forward to crafting with you again.